Hello everyone and welcome to our tutorial video for the South African Schools Debating Board Youth Derby competition, which will be hosted from the 12th of June up until the 14th of June this year, in celebration of Youth Day, to celebrate all our high school debaters across the nation who, due to COVID-19, have unfortunately been unable to participate in their normal physical debating competitions. We hope to bring you this competition as a mechanism for you to be able to access debating right from your homes and to be able to have a competitive competition to hopefully, replace some of the lost debating time that you have lost due to COVID-19. So who are we? What do we do? What are we about? We're the South African Schools Debating Board, and we are the official coordinator of World School Style Debating in South Africa. Our responsibility is to select the national SA team that goes on to represent us at the World Schools Debating Competition. We're also responsible for hosting the national debating competition that happens every single year towards the end of the year in December. As a board, our aim is to make sure that debating and all its benefits are accessible to high school learners across South Africa. And what we hope to do is to have more competitions like this that make it possible for young minds to come together and to be able to explore interesting topics in a way that is fun, exciting, and challenging for you and for everyone that you engage with on this platform. So the point of today's video is to give you more information about the style we're going to be using for our competition. So for the first time, we're going to be running a British Parliamentary Style debate. This consists of 4 teams and 2 speakers in each team. And our very renowned university debater, Akhisang Fabanda, is going to be giving you more information on this format. Akhisang is a third-year education student at University of Pretoria. He's also the school's representative for the University of Pretoria's debating union. And he's going to be taking us through the format we're going to be using for this competition, giving you guys tips that you can use to prepare yourselves for the competition coming up. We're also going to host an Instagram question and answer session that you guys can attend to ask us questions relating to the format that we're going to be using, because it is quite new and some of you might not have ever debated in this format before. However, it's a really fun format. It's really exciting. You get to debate with more people. It allows room for more people to be in a single debate room. It's a really exciting format that we're trying out as the South African Schools Debating Board, and we really hope to see how you guys take it on and how you carry it forward. Remember that all the general techniques of normal debating can still be implemented in the style. So argument formation, rebuttal, all of that is still important. So you can watch any of our other videos on our YouTube channel that talk about how to set up an argument, how to create content, how to respond to arguments. All of those videos are still relevant for this competition and will put you in a really good step to excel at this tournament and to debate at your best. So to explain to you more about how the format is going to work and how our tournament is going to work, Rimbi is going to take you forward with that.
Thank you very much, Bettina. So thank you for everyone watching this video. I hope that you're all as excited as we are as the SASDB. So the Youth Day Derby is our inaugural Youth Day competition. It's the first time we're having this competition, and we're having it in honor of Youth Day for the Soweto uprisings of 1976. As a South African, this day is extremely important to a lot of us, and we hope to empower the youth. We hope to empower young people to raise their voices, to speak their minds, and to learn new skills. On top of that, as Bettina has said, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we haven't been able to implement schools, leagues, and physical debating tournaments. So this is an opportunity for you to participate from the comfort of your own home in a very competitive debating tournament. So our tournament will be running from Friday the 12th of June until Tuesday the 16th of June on Youth Day. On Friday the 12th of June, we'll have rounds 1 to 2. On Saturday, the 13th of June, we'll have rounds 3 to 5. On Sunday, we'll have the quarter and semi-finals. And then on Tuesday, the 16th of June, we'll have our finals. All of our rounds will start at 2 p.m. So even if you happen to be back at school by then, you're more than welcome to participate, and you should be able to participate. As Bettina has also mentioned, we're going to have an Instagram live session where you'll be able to ask questions about the format that we'll be using. So as much as we do coordinate world school style debating in South Africa, for this tournament we'll be using British parliamentary debating. And Arisang will explain more about the format. Arisang, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my weird red lair, as it were. British parliamentary debating style that this tournament is going to make use of has similarities to world school style, which some of you might be quite aware of. This format is fundamentally different in a lot of ways. As Bettina mentioned, many of the basics that are required for argumentation are still necessary, but the way that you go about doing these things is going to be different. And we're going to start first with the basic format of how a British parliamentary debate would look like. A British parliamentary debate would effectively have two benches or two sides. Side government, which we would call proposition in world school style, and the opposition side. Now, on each bench, there are effectively two teams. So there's two proposition teams and two opposition teams. Now, of course, those two teams are separate. They do not necessarily interact with each other in prep, but they are on the same side of the motion and are thus required to argue for that side. And each one of those teams on the individual benches has a unique role that they ought to fulfill in the debate. And these are effectively the names shown on the slide of those teams that are involved in the debate. So because there are two sides, two teams in each side, there is effectively an opening half of the debate and a closing half of the debate. Each team will consist of two speakers, and each speaker will, of course, have their own role that will be discussed. So let's go through the team names quite very quickly. The first team, which is the first proposition team, as it were, is called the opening government, and the first opposition team would be called the opening opposition. These teams form a part of the first half of a British parliamentary debate. Then the closing half of the debate would be initiated by the closing government side, and then we will get a closing response from that opposition side. It works in the same sort of alternating way as you would see speakers in a world school style. You first get a proposition, then you get an opposition, then you get a proposition, then you get an opposition, alternating in that order, but with 4 teams in a debate. The way that a team is decided to win a debate in British parliamentary style is by way of ranking. So there's not necessarily like an objective, or there is what we'd say an objective winner in the team that would rank first, and somewhat of an objective loser in the team that would rank fourth. And generally with these kind of tournaments, what you'd see is the team that would rank first would get 3 points added to the tab in their advantage. The team that would rank second would get 2 points. The team that ranks third in the debate would get a 1 point, and the team that ranks fourth wouldn't get a point. And those sorts of rankings are decided by a variety of dynamics that happen in a debate. So it is decided by primarily the team that would best argue their side, but not simply argue their side, how best that they argue their side in the debate comparatively with all the other teams in the debate. So that's the basic format and how that would work. Generally, prep times in British parliamentary would be 15 minutes. So but while most of you would usually go to the beach when it's an hour prep, so 15 minutes really puts you in the mood and at your sharpest. So that's the basic format of how a British parliamentary debate would go. Now we're going to look at the different speakers that form a part of a British parliamentary debate and the kind of roles that those speakers would have. So let's start with the opening government, the first team that would present their speeches, right? In opening government, the first speaker in that team, the first speaker in the debate, is called the Prime Minister. Now, the Prime Minister has very similar roles to what we would say a proposition first speaker would have in world school style debates. Fundamentally, what they need to do is they need to contextualize the debate, i.e. give important definitions, provide the debate with important status quo analysis, or provide a problem that is associated with the debate, and present a model or a criteria or a policy that their side is going to defend within that debate. Then secondly, what the Prime Minister would then do is present opening government's sort of first main arguments in the debate, right? So very simplistic roles, not particularly complicated, but it's a very important role because if the contextualization that they do at the beginning of the debate is quite shaky, and it leaves their team at a disadvantage and the debate at large at a disadvantage. So providing the right definition, providing the right a characterization of how the world that they are defending looks like becomes a very important role for them. Prime ministers are generally, in terms of their traits, they're generally quite structured and clear in their delivery, and they're able to unpack analysis to a great depth. But importantly, they're capable of establishing a very good setup in the debate that enables their side to stay relevant. The most important thing that you would probably hear when talking about British parliamentary debating is the capacity to stay relevant. Relevance means that a lot of the arguments and the contextualization which your side sets endures and consistently remains important throughout the debate. That becomes very important because opening government as opposed to a closing opposition is a huge gap in time, and it takes a lot to maintain relevance in the debate. So what the Prime Minister does to set up the arguments and the context is quite crucial in sustaining their side's relevance in the debate. And then we have the first speaker from opening opposition, which we would call the opposition leader or the leader of opposition. What they do is effectively they recontextualize the debate if it either has not been done or there were too many holes that were not covered by the Prime Minister. So that recontextualization becomes a very cool strategic tool for these guys to use to pull the debate away from OG. Secondly, they would do rebuttal to opening government's Prime Minister. They would directly respond to the arguments that they created, and then the opposition leader would then present their own arguments. So this role would be quite similar to an opposition first speaker that you'd see in world school style. A leader of opposition quite generally adept at responding to ideas with very limited time. So first response speeches require that in any format. They're strategically aware of where their side is placed in the debate and how to sway the debate to their side early on and take away the advantage from opening government. And lastly, they're comfortable with running both substantive matter and rebuttal, or alternatively, they are able to integrate responses within their arguments. So that would be a very useful tool if you have it for specifically this role. And then we go back to opening government and their second speaker, which is called their deputy Prime Minister, and as well as the second speaker from the opening opposition, which is called the deputy leader of opposition. Both of these roles effectively do the same thing. They firstly do rebuttal, as you would to to the speaker that just came before you. And then secondly, they would develop their own team's case by providing new argumentation that furthers their case. So this would be very similar to like a second speech of sorts, that you ought not just repeat the stuff that your prime minister or your leader of opposition said, but develop new arguments and new perspectives for the debate so that your case is much more substantiated, right? Again, both of these roles generally quite good at controlling substantive and rebuttal well. Secondly, they're able to identify where the comparative lies in the debate. So generally in a debate, you'll find that a side is comparing two ideas or two notions or two ways of doing something. These speakers ought to be very adept at identifying what those comparisons are and making sure that their side is winning those comparisons. And lastly, they're able to jointly with their partner construct cool, creative ideas for the debate. And then we move on. So that's the opening half of the debate. Opening government, opening opposition. They've said their piece. They've tried to push the debate to their side. Now we go to the closing half of the debate. And we start first with what are called the member speeches. These are the first speeches from closing government and closing opposition. If we start with the member of government attempts to engage with the opening half of the debate, right? So in the opening half, they would generally respond to the arguments that opening opposition presented. So again, the format works in such a way that because there are two teams that are on the same side, it's generally not very wise to respond or rebut to the team that's on your bench, but even though they're not your teammates, like if you're opening government, don't respond to closing. If you're closing government, don't respond to opening government. It's awkward, it's weird, no one wants to see it. But generally continue arguing against the side that is opposite to what you're defending in the debate. And that's what the member of government would do. Engage with the opening half of the debate and show what they're going to do to the debate that's different, or what they're going to do to further that sort of engagement with the debate that's better than the opening half. Then secondly, that they would then present what is called an extension. We'll get into what an extension means later. And then the member of opposition would do the same, engage with the opening half and engage with the speech that just came before them from the member of government and present closing opposition's extension. So member speeches are not quite analogous to anything in world schools, probably more like a weird mixture of firsts and seconds at the same time, because they have to combine so much work because so much of the debate has already happened. And then we get to the whips, the whip speeches. So these are the partners to the members. We have the government whip and the opposition whip. Both of these roles do exactly the same thing. These speakers are quite similar to third speeches in that they present primarily just rebuttal. So they would rebut their opponent's cases while also doing defensive rebuttal in defending the attacks that their case has experienced. So both a mixture of defensive and offensive rebuttal, and lastly would make some sort of an evaluation of the debate and their side's impact on the debate and why then they ought to win on the comparative. Much like third speeches, new argumentation is frowned upon and isn't necessarily a cool thing to do. However, new responses are still valuable. So responses that haven't been made in the debate to expand the scope of how much you're winning will always be very necessary. And then in terms of the argument structure, much like Bettina mentioned, the argumentation that you're likely to do will follow the same sort of logic of claim analysis and the sort of links and conclusions that you would then give. So really any sort of guide is likely to explain this more depth. And similarly with rebuttal, as we mentioned before, there are different kinds of rebuttal that you can adapt to these sorts of, this kind of format. Direct rebuttal is the basic kind of rebuttal where you would be proving that the argument that the other side is presenting is not true. And the other more was saying was true, and why do we still think that your side is more valuable in the debate, or why are there less harmful alternatives in your side? Sort of introducing weigh-ups. Weigh-ups are very important in this kind of format because you don't outright win the debate, but you win the debate comparatively to everyone else. So if you can prove weigh-ups and do even if responses, that will be very valuable. And now let's get into that bit about extensions. So this is the stuff that member speeches pretty much focus on and is the lifeblood of a closing half of the debate. An extension is sort of the new arguments that the closing half are going to present to the debate. So because the same arguments that opening government made, they need to adapt and make new kinds of arguments and new contributions in the debate, or else they'll simply be derivative of the opening half, which means that they didn't add any kind of contribution. And an extension, as this list shows, can exist in a multitude of ways. It can exist in, firstly, providing a new justification for why an argument is true, so providing new analysis to already existing arguments. So opening government could have made an argument, but did not necessarily add specific aspects of analysis that could make that argument valuable. Secondly, it can be an identification. Let me move this weird Zoom thing. It can be an identification of an impact that the opening half missed. So if the opening half didn't necessarily point to very potent impact of a specific argument or a harm of a specific argument that already exists, an extension or closing to use will be very valuable. A new rebuttal to a kind of key argument from the other side of the house is also valuable as a form of extension, or a completely new framework of understanding and looking at specific issues. So the opening half can have its own understanding and its own context in how it conceptualizes the issues of the debate, but your side as an extension can introduce an entirely new perspective to consider that the debate can be premised on. Additionally, they can also find a new way to weight certain respective claims in the debate. So proving a different kind of importance for an argument that already exists as opposed to the importance that was proven in the opening half, or ideally and rather easily, you can just present completely new lines of argumentation that weren't done altogether. So constructing extensions require some level of, firstly, creativity, because if you know you drew a side that's on the closing half, during prep, you and your partner would ideally be like, yo, dude, we're gonna have these arguments and they're pretty stark, so maybe the opening half is probably gonna think of doing this. Let's think of a new way to adapt this sort of argument that possibly won't be used by the opening half. Or alternatively, you require a combination of creativity and adaptability. So assuming you prep the case, and this is the case that you're gonna run, but you're listening to the opening half and the other side on, the other team on your side, and they're presenting arguments that are quite similar to yours, that would require you to adapt your arguments and say, okay, here's how we're going to create this extension that isn't derivative of the other side and presents completely new perspectives to consider in the debate. And lastly, and importantly, in this kind of format, what you're going to need is like very good strategic awareness. So understanding what your burdens are in the debate and what you need to be proving becomes very important. Becomes very important in fulfilling the basics. Secondly, ensuring that there's a general consistency between you and your partner and there's coherence in what you're running becomes very important. Thirdly, progression, especially from the perspective of closing halves. If closing halves don't progress the debate and introduce extensions that are valuable, it's going to stagnate and their sides will be ranked not as favorably. Prioritization becomes very important because what you prioritize in the debate will justify where you rank. Because if you're prioritizing issues that no one else is really focusing on in the debate and aren't quite relevant to the discussions of the debate, that means you'll rank unfavorably because you weren't necessarily engaging with the other sides. And then lastly, an awareness of what's happening in the debate. These kind of debates are very high octane, and the way that the format works means that it requires you to be very aware of where you are in the debate and what's happening and how arguments are being engaged with and adapted with so that you can adapt your own case strategy in a very functional way to be effective in the debate. Yep, that's my weird tutorial of the weirdest format in debating that is. Yes.
Thank you very much, Arisang.
Yeah.
Bettina and I have a few questions for you. So I think I'll go first. The first question is, do you think that an adaptation from world schools debating to British parliamentary is realistically doable? If you have high school speakers who've never done BP before, would you still recommend that they enter a BP tournament?
I think in terms of the skills that would come from BP, they're so valuable for world schools. So BP puts you in a position where you have to strategically think on your feet a lot, prep a case in limited time, and engage with ideas on a more abstract strategic level as opposed to like the binaries that exist. But I think BP is also very good for developing your comparative skills, which is also useful in world schools. But because the roles aren't completely out there and do relate quite well to world schools, I think the adaptation process would be weird at first, but it's very valuable. And I think it's very doable as well.
Thank you very much. Bettina, do you have any questions before we close off?
Yes, I do. So the first question I want to ask is for the learners that are watching. So just so you can give them a bit of guidance. So are the teams that are in the debates allowed to prep together, and can they help each other?
Who knows? So as I said before, there'll be two teams on one side, but there are two very separate teams. They're going to be ranked differently. They're going to be evaluated differently. And as we pointed out with things like extensions, they're going to run different matter in the debate. So they can't prep together, but there are only commonalities that they're on the same side and that they're defending the same fundamental view, but they're going to do it in very different ways, and therefore they're going to prep differently as well. So they can't prep together. They're two different teams. It'll be like prepping another school that's also in prop when you're in prop. It's like, wait, stop. But yes, teams different prep altogether.
Okay, and with that, just so we can mention there, so how the tournament is going to work is that the debates are going to happen on Google Meet, the Google Meet format. So you will be told in a general WhatsApp group. So we'll have a Google Meet briefing where everyone will join one singular Google Meet call at the beginning of the round, and there you will see your draw for the call, and it will tell you which meeting link you need to click onto for your debate. So for example, we'll have meeting 1, meeting 2, all the way up until meeting 16, and then you join the meeting for your debate after 15 minutes of prep time. The 15 minutes of prep time you're going to get, so you can decide on whatever format you and your partner want to use for the 15 minutes of prep time. So you can simply use a WhatsApp call for those 15 minutes if that's what you choose. And then once the 15 minutes is over, we'll send a reminder on the WhatsApp group that everyone should now enter their debates. And then you will click on the link that'll be provided to you in a big WhatsApp group, and you will join the meeting that has been allocated to you based on your draw. So that's how the preparation is going to work. Okay, then my second question for you, Akhisang, is what if you are on the bottom half and you disagree with the setup of your opening team? What do you do in that circumstance where there's something that your opening team has said that you disagree with and that affects you in the debate?
So ideally, you if something happens in the open half that isn't quite necessarily how you envisioned the debate, you can simply clarify and say, like, the opening half had this sort of interpretation of this context or of this issue. We differ slightly in that we go this way. So it's not ideal to necessarily say that the team that's on your side is like trash and I'm gonna completely kill off their case sort of side, and your arguments are premised on a very similar kind of logic. So it's ideal to make sure that you're presenting your clarification in a way that says, yes, we are differing slightly and this is the way that we're going to go, as opposed to you saying the other side or the team that's on our opening half is just completely ruining this for us. That's not ideal. So any sort of reclarification or recontextualization is actually quite good because it shows that you are aware of what's happening in the debate and you can improve it.
Okay, perfect. And then my last question is, so is it harder for teams that are in the bottom half to win because they're speaking later, or is it harder for the teams on the top half to win because they don't get to have a say once their speeches is done, or is it an equal weight for both sides?
Yeah, I think there is an equal pros and cons list that you can say, because from the openings perspective, they have a lot of freedom to say, hey, we're going first. So we can stuff as much matter that we can into the speech and substantiate it so that our matter in the debate is bulky and the other teams have to get very creative to create that. But also from the closing side, they have more perspective to see where the debate is going strategically. They generally have more time to develop and adapt to those things, where the opening half can't necessarily create a kind of attack unless they use points of information. So it is a pretty equal weighting in terms of the pros and cons. There wouldn't necessarily be a very good preference because there are equally roles that you need to fulfill on both sides that make it hard to say that this is a favorable position to be in the debate. But most university students would say, oh is the best. They're lying.
Perfect. I just have one last question. So for example, if you're on the closing half, is it sufficient to come up with any extension, or is there a specific quality of the extension that you need to come up with? So can you just win by saying something new, or must that new thing, what must it consist of?
So that new thing shouldn't just be any old nonsense. It should be very relevant to where the debate is strategically. So it ought to answer the kind of core issues that are already existent in the debate, but it also needs to be very relevant to the context in which the debate is set in. So it simply can't win if it's just new or if it's just different. It also needs to do work to try and win, but it also needs to hold up well comparatively with the other side's arguments in the debate. That comparison becomes very important given the nature of the ranking system.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Akizang. That was super helpful. Thank you for your tutorial.
Mm-hmm.
So over to Rimbi just to close up everything.
Ooh, Rimbi's sound is off.
I was muted. I'm sorry.
No.
We'd like to say thank you to Arisang as the SASDB for running our training session. It was very informative and we're very thankful for that. I'd like to thank Bettina for coordinating the session with me and for your questions. And for everyone watching, please do remember that registration for our tournament closes on the 9th of June. It's 50 Rand per person, so it's 100 Rand per team, very affordable. And even if you can't afford it, you're more than welcome to apply for a fee waiver via email if you email operations@sadebating.org. We're almost out of time because Zoom has a time limit. So with that, thank you so much, and we look forward to the tournament and to your registrations.